Hello and welcome to another TLDR US video. In this installment, we're going to be taking a look at the ongoing attempts to remove President Donald Trump from office before his term is complete. Yes, there's only about a week to go until he's actually officially replaced by President-elect Joe Biden, but after Trump's involvement in last week's chilling events, Democrats are pushing for his expedited exit. We're going to take you through some of the ways that they're hoping to do this, whether it be the 25th Amendment or through yesterday's second impeachment, as well as discussing some of the concerns over more potentially violent incidents in the next few days. Before we start, a quick heads up. Due to this video discussing the Capitol siege, it's very likely that, like our video last week, it will end up being demonetized, with last week's video getting 112,000 views but earning less than $100, not even enough to cover the cost of making it. So if you want to support our independence to make anything we want without having to worry about the algorithm, then please consider donating through PayPal or signing up to our Patreon, where you get a whole bunch of perks in return for your donations. Anyway, thank you so much for your support. Before we get into the ways in which Trump could, emphasis on could, be removed from the presidency, let's quickly recap what we saw go down on Wednesday. A violent mob of Trump supporters, seeking, in their words, to stop the steal, smashed their way into the Capitol building. This deliberately occurred at the same time as Congress was certifying the results of the November 3rd election. The worrying thing is that this was not a coincidental gathering of protesters that just happened to escalate into violence. This was a clearly premeditated event. Of course, this event is a problem in itself, but the fact that President Trump is seen to have encouraged at least part of the incident is why so many people are outraged. It's argued that he is complicit in the violence through his constant rhetoric before and since the election, undermining the process of democracy without any clear evidence, but most strikingly through a speech he gave just prior to the unfolding of the rioting. Clearly, along with the majority of the nation and the world, Democrats are very upset with Trump's behaviour and therefore seeking to hasten his removal from the presidency that he's desperately tried to cling on to for the recent weeks. Owing to time constraints, their first port of call to do this was using the 25th Amendment. Now, the part of the 25th Amendment that officials are calling to be used states that if the Vice President and a majority of the Cabinet are in favour, power can be transferred from the President to his second-in-command. The slight problem, though, is that this was intended to only be used when the President was so ill that they could not actually do their job. So its use in the present instance is a little murky, to say the least. On Monday, an attempt to fast-track the process of requesting that Vice President Mike Pence turn on Trump was blocked by Republicans, leading to a resolution going to a proper vote on Tuesday, which passed the House of Representatives 223 to 205. However, as expected, the Vice President rejected the vote calling for him to take action, arguing that it was not in the best interest of our nation or consistent with the Constitution. Anyway, even if Pence and the cabinet did want to remove him, Trump would be within his rights to dispute it, thus leading to the need of a supermajority in both the House and the Senate to get rid of him. In addition, as every member of the cabinet, other than the vice president, serves at the president's pleasure, Trump could purge any officials other than Pence who support the move. So the 25th Amendment, for various reasons, didn't and wouldn't quite work as a tool for the Democrats. Before the confirmation that attempts of the 25th would fail, the Democrats were already a step ahead and had scheduled the impeachment process for Wednesday. The reason referenced in the article of impeachment put forward has been labelled as incitement of insurrection, which is likely to be considered as a high crime or misdemeanour. A debate and vote on the article was held on Wednesday in the House, with the result being a 237-197-5 split. As is clear then, Democrats were overwhelmingly in favour of the impeachment. But in addition to this, the predictions that some Republicans would also support impeachment came true. In total, 10 Republicans voted to impeach. Among their number were Republican Adam Kinzinger and House Representative Conference Chair Liz Cheney, making this the most bipartisan presidential impeachment in history. And this is markedly different from Trump's first impeachment, when no House Republicans voted against him. While this is all significant, it doesn't exactly change anything, as the Democrat-controlled House was always going to vote for impeachment, regardless of the GOP's help. The big responsibility lies with the Senate, which holds the trial and has the final say on whether the president is actually removed from office. Removal requires a supermajority of 67 senators to vote to convict. However, this may not happen, as even with a soon-to-be Democrat-controlled Senate and some Republican dissenters, it would still be a very high margin to reach. Shockingly though, over the last few days there have been rumours that it may be more possible than we think. The New York Times have suggested that there are possibly 20 GOP senators contemplating voting against the president, which is especially significant when you consider that Mitch McConnell, who's their leader in the Senate, is apparently happy that Trump has been impeached, seeing it as a golden opportunity to rid their party of both Trump and Trumpism. Anyway, that brings us to the practicality of the impeachment process actually being fulfilled. There is no chance of it being carried out in full before Inauguration Day, seeing as the Senate does not properly reconvene until January 19th, just one day prior. And even if it did come back early, which McConnell has said isn't going to happen, and even if a supermajority was achieved, which maybe isn't going to happen, the chance of Trump being kicked out early would be minimal, considering that his last impeachment trial lasted almost 3 weeks. That being said, it is thought that the trial could continue into the Biden era, with the view that it would still be a symbolic rejection of the Trump presidency, making it abundantly clear that Congress disapproves of Trump's actions and setting a clear precedent for the future. With the concern that if they don't act, there's the risk of what happens if someone attempts to do this again in the future. Plus, Democrats hope that after the conviction, they could bar Trump from ever holding office again, something that would only require a simple majority, which would permanently put the brakes on the potential of a Trump 2024 campaign. These arguments, to give Trump his comeuppance and prevent him from holding public office again, are two of the key arguments why his opponents are pushing for impeachment. But what about the arguments against? Well, clearly if you ask Trump and his supporters, they would be against this for obvious reasons. But what about Democrats? Well, Joe Biden has talked a lot about this being a time for healing, especially in the face of last week's events. So you'd think that he's probably not keen to stoke more division. There are certainly fears that a drawn-out impeachment process would only fan the already large flames of discontent in the Trump camp. However, Biden has said that he will not try and block an impeachment push, although he will want it to work alongside his cabinet being confirmed by the Senate. As a final interesting point on this subject, there's one other quirky amendment that some people have taken hope in, the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment was created in the 19th century to prevent former Confederate officials from being able to hold future office, on the grounds that they engaged in insurrection or rebellion, or assisted those who did. It's claimed that this could therefore be applicable to Trump if he ever tries to run again. Now, let me just say this is very, very unlikely to be used, not least because the contexts of the times are completely different. But then again, the context of the 25th is different too, so maybe the 14th will be used in a desperate attempt to try and stop a second Trump rise. There is one other thing we need to talk about though, and that's worrying plans for more potentially dangerous events in the days to come. There have been major criticisms of the Capitol Police for their failures to quell the uprising on the 6th of January, and with the inauguration coming, they, along with police forces across the country, will have to be ready for more, and the push to remove Trump from office is probably not going to make his supporters any calmer. There are even background checks being run on members of the armed forces to ensure that the inauguration is safe, and to make sure they're not sympathetic to domestic terrorists. On a wider scale though, on social media there's clear public plans for more disruption like we saw last week. For example, an armed march on all state capitals is planned for Saturday 16th onwards. Even though it doesn't expect major incidents in all states, the FBI is on top of these plans and is urging local police to prepare so that they're ready for whatever may come. As some commentators on Twitter have been quick to point out, surely the fact that a protest is being described as armed lends itself to be thought of as more violent than peaceful, even from the outset. Regardless, let's hope that people are more sensible this time and nothing violent ends up coming from this. It should also be noted that in a surprising move, President Trump has already issued an order to bolster the security of the inauguration. Who knows what his motive is for this, but it should help. Well, that just about sums everything up, and we'll have to see what ends up happening over the next few days with regards to the impeachment process, as well as what happens with the protests or potential riots and terrorist events. Hopefully everything and everyone can be kept safe so that we don't see another repeat of last week's events. Let us know in the comments below what you think about the issues we've discussed today. Will Trump be convicted and barred from future elections? Do Democrats need to just drop it and get on with a new era? And will law enforcement get a better grip on future dangers? Let us know your thoughts below. As always, be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon to be notified every time we release a new video. Special thanks to our Patreon backers who make videos like this one possible. And if you want to see your name at the end of videos, then you too can back us on Patreon. The link to that's in the description.